Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We are going to get started in just a minute.
Tina, maybe we could invite people to the sun run.
Oh, yeah.
When we're talking about it.
You have a national audience on here, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we can invite everybody.
Everybody's always invited, yeah.
That's right. We'll make sure we say that after the BBC slide. So during this, are the three of us on screen for everybody else? Or no?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Megan McMahon, and I am the Director of Strategic Development here at Link Senior. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We are providing one free NAB, NCAP, NCCDP, NCTRC, and NZSRDT CEU credit today. To be eligible for those CEU credits, you do need to remain on this webinar for the full hour. At the end of the webinar, I will provide the required post-webinar CEU survey evaluation link in the chat box, and I will also send you that link by email this afternoon. Please be sure to check your email spam folder. This survey must be completed by midnight Eastern Time this Thursday. If you have any questions after the webinar today, please be sure to email us at webinars@linksenior.com. Your CEU certificates will be issued by email before the end of the day on Friday, November 19th. Again, please be sure to check your spam folder in case it lands there. And I will now hand it over to Charles de Villemorn, CEO and co-founder of Link Senior. Charles?
Thank you so much, Megan. And welcome, everyone. Welcome, actually, from the three of us, Megan and Tina and myself, we're all the three of us today from Washington, D.C., from sunny Washington, D.C. So welcome, everyone, to our Activity Strong webinar for resident engagement professional. As a reminder, Activity Strong is an initiative to acknowledge the amazing work that you all do, activity and life enrichment professionals, but also empower you and educate you. And we do this, it is led by Link Senior, but we do this in partnership with Activity Connection, NAP, and NCAP. And so today is our live webinar on November 16th, and we are going to be talking about Chief Engagement Officer is a verb, not a noun. And so what does that mean? And how can we implement best practices? Tina Sandri, Chief Executive Officer of Forest Hills of DC, which is a nonprofit community here in Washington, DC, is going to tell us all about that. A quick note before we get started, many of you enjoy using the chat feature of Zoom. If you want your chat to be seen by everyone, please make sure you select everyone versus just panel or host to make sure that everybody can learn from you or just engage with you. Like Megan said, my name is Charles de Villemorn. I am the CEO and co-founder of Link Senior. I think probably the most important things about me is that I believe that old people are cool and that our industry is activity strong. These are two foundational aspects of our culture here at Link Senior. We started Old People Are Cool about 7 years ago for many different reasons. Probably the most important ones is that we think that everybody is cool, including elders, and we're not big fans of this segregation based on age. And then we started this initiative called Activity Strong as the pandemic was unfolding, as we always believed, but saw the immense need to really acknowledge all of you, whether you work and your title is activity or life enrichment professionals, or if you are any other member of the senior living industry. Obviously, one of the reasons why you would be here is that you either respect or value life enrichment and the work of providing our residents with purpose every day. Link Senior is a resident engagement platform. So we work with thousands of team members like you across Canada, the US and Canada, we touched 45,000 lives. And essentially our work is all about your work, which is resident engagement. We pride ourselves in helping elevate the experience of resident engagement by providing access to simple technology to help you sometimes triple to quadruple the amount of engagement that you're providing. But we also help manage engagement, whether it's the ID teaching efforts, care planning, or family engagement. And then what I am the most proud of as the co-founder of the company is the amount of human touch. We essentially help you spend more time, more quality time with your residents. So that's about Link Senior. Very proud of our work, very proud also of the fact that our work has been published in a peer-reviewed journal. We did a clinical study with amazing outcomes, clinical outcomes, some of which are shown here. And again, if you have any interest in having a conversation with us, please be in touch. So today's presentation, I could talk about Tina for a lot of time, you know, hours, days, weeks, and all of that. But I'll just start with the fact that she's a friend, and it's really an immense honor to be introducing her. She's one of the leaders in the industry, and please, this is probably the most important thing I'll say about Tina. She's the type of leaders that if we could, quote unquote, clone, the industry will be better off. I don't think that she wants to be cloned. I don't think her family wants her to be cloned, but essentially she is a leader that firmly believes in engagement. And I thought of no other way to introduce her presentation by just sharing one of our values and one of the things that we deeply believe in at Link Senior, which is that all of you activity and life enrichment professionals should be, quote unquote, promoted as CEOs, and CEOs in the form of Chief Engagement Officers, because you are technically the leaders when it comes to engagement, right? You're the source of knowledge. You know how to do activity and life enrichment professionals. And many organizations value this so much that they promote professionals like you. And we believe that ultimately organizations should value it at the quote unquote C level, right? The C-suite. So with that, immense honor to introduce you, Tina. Tina, thank you for joining us today. And all of you, I wish you a very educational and informational session today. Tina, it's yours. Thank you.
Good day to everybody. Charles, you are just too kind. Thank you for that introduction. For those of you that don't know me, I am a CEO of a nonprofit. We've been here for over 135 years. I'm also affiliated with the American Healthcare Association, state affiliate chapter, and I sit on the National Board of Governors. And I'm in the process right now during COVID of getting my 500-hour yoga teacher certification. So I'm a registered yoga 200-hour teacher right now. And so some of that engagement has to do that I'm interested in working with the feel and the energy and the excitement and building of community, really building of community for our residents as well as our staff. And it's not just about residents, it's not just about staff. In my position, I'm concerned about the engagement of the entire building and how we work together with all that. I've gotten to know Charles and Megan also through some volunteer work with Aging 2.0, a innovative organization that looks at the challenges of aging and innovation and how to solve those issues. We've been fortunate during COVID to be able to do some, I don't know if it's innovative or it's engaged work within our community on vaccinations. And if you go to our website, you're able to see some of the things that we've done to create engagement within our workforce and our residents to yield extremely high vaccination results in our community, and therefore a safe place for people to re-engage with our community. Next slide. So to tell you a little bit about Forest Hills, we are a 135 years faith-based organization in Washington, D.C. We're in an urban area. We have a continuum of services that includes skilled services, assisted living, and assisted living secured memory care services. On top of that, we also do respite and hospice in each of those settings as well. We are a top shelf CMS 5-star ranked, where US News and World Report's top shelf ranked as well. So we're pretty pleased with the abilities to deliver good services. Within the last year, our organization went through a little bit of self-assessment, as I'm sure a lot of your organizations have done during this COVID pandemic. We have realigned our mission, vision, and values to where we want to go in the future. And some of that, what I want to highlight out of our mission is that we exist to inspire and engage. And you'll notice that the words care for, quality services, nursing home, assisted living are not in our mission statement, because we view those as the floor, as the environment in which we fulfill our mission, which is to inspire and engage our seniors and by extension, the families and our residents and our staff. Our values are inclusion and compassion, a growth mindset where we believe when we know better, we do better, and that there's always the potential for our residents, for our staff to grow with us. Integrity, respect, and sustainability are also values. And when we talk about sustainability, it's not just the environment. The sustainability has to do with things like our workforce. Do we have enough workforce? Do we have the things that we need to support in our engagement programs with our activities and our other departments? And so we look at that lens through everything we do. In words of my job, that's also calling, does everybody have the tools to do the job that they're intending to do? Next slide. So to tell you a little bit about our structure, being a standalone campus, we have various departments, and as you can tell on this slide, I have direct reports. I have 4 direct reports within the community. And then our administrator has all the rest of the departments and all the clinical heavy lifting. But the departments that align to me, you will see between budgets, dining, human resources, and marketing and missions have the most interaction with the outside of the building. And so whether that's an ANC neighborhood group, whether that is a college or university, whether that's with COVID, so many things have been closed down, but all those typical places that you would have external relations is a part of my job. And so I look at those opportunities to bring those connections into the building, and at times we'll hand them off to our Life Enrichment team or other folks in the building as well. So making and forging those network connections that benefit our residents is also part of my job. Next slide. So when we're talking about engagement, I do want to talk about a couple of factors that have to do with engagement that get overlaid on each of the sort of tactics or strategies that I'm going to talk about later. And the first one is culture. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. If you have not heard that phrase before, what that means is you can have an idea, you can have a plan, but if the culture doesn't support it, you might as well go back to square one. And time and time again, this has been shown to be a true thing. And for me, our culture has to be consistent with those values I just talked about on our previous slide. So the culture that I want to create here is consistent with empathy, with compassion, with respect, with growth mindset, and so forth. Then next, we also have to have the abilities to execute successfully. In nursing language these days, that's called competencies. The new requirements of participation require us to validate that many of our clinical teams have the capabilities to not just learn, but demonstrate and execute what they've learned. And in my role, I like to think of that as time, talent, and treasure. Do our teams have the time to execute on what they're trying to do? Do we have the talent? Do we have the right people rowing in the boat to get us to where we need to go? And do we have the treasure? Do we have the finances? Do we have the tools? Do we have the setup that we need to make sure that we have those capabilities all lined up? And then lastly, we have to have the aspiration, the goal, the desire, the wish to make something happen. You can call that a budgetary goal. You can call that a departmental goal. You can call that a resident council wish list, but you're going to have a reason to be doing what we're doing. So these are sort of three lenses that I would invite you to consider as we talk about strategies where we might see more engagement across the community. Next slide. And by the way, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and we'll be monitoring those and try to answer everybody's questions along the way. So,
Tina, sorry, just actually, there was a question that came in from Jen. And the question here was about how can an individual, so anybody in the audience, right, how can they be an advocate to an organization that has a great culture, but it may not trickle down in every department? So I think that what Jen is getting is either not every department is embracing the culture, or it's not going through from top to bottom. Any thoughts about that?
Great question. So in my role, I view my responsibilities having setting the tone of culture. If you look at various big companies, big box companies that do well, you're going to see their CEO out there publicly engaging in culture conversations, setting the tone, right? When you go to a Ben & Jerry's, you have a certain tone that's set there. When you go to I don't know, a Starbucks or certain places, you know that there's a certain culture, a certain ambiance and feel. And I would also liken it somewhat to if you went into your favorite spa, if you went into a massage place, if you went to a football game, before you sit down for that service, there's a certain energetic feel, there's a culture, there's this sort of intangible that you can just feel in your gut that's there. And that's the goal that I try to set for our buildings. And I think if you're trying to introduce that, having a conversation with leadership, perhaps behind closed doors, you know, where people can be more relaxed and honest in conversation, and giving that feedback to leadership is one thing to do. Another thing to do is to actually role model that behavior and get other folks involved. Sometimes folks will grab me when they want me involved in various departmental activities, and they'll just grab me by the hands and say, let's go. I need you to give a, 30-second thank you speech or a pep speech, or, just need to say hi to some residents. And so fostering that attitude of helping each other on the team and being flexible and being able to engage in those on the spot opportunities, right? Learning moments of learning opportunities and small moments of engagement, don't let them slip by. And so it requires maybe for you to have a conversation and for you to also go out and invite people to participate in what you're doing. Okay, so moving on, this slide is about personal contributions to life enrichment. So I look at engagement at three different levels. So one is, what can I do? What is my footprint and what are my responsibilities? What are my actions and reactions that I control? And then at the next level would be things about how do I impact our team? And then another level will be, how do I go outside of the building? And so those are the sort of the three goals that I want to talk about here today. So some examples of this would be to personally participate in the regular life enrichment activities calendar. So I'll get the monthly calendar and I'll look through it and I'll say, well, here's 2 or 3 things I'd like to be at this month. And I'll put it into my calendar. I know the holidays are coming up. So an easy one is as choir groups come in or our folks are doing sing-alongs, you could do something like that. And it's a pretty low lift to be able to participate in the community and just show that you are supportive of those types of things. Next option would be to co-sponsor and champion a few activities each year, roll up your sleeves and help residents find purpose in your community and care plan it. So we have a resident in our assisted living who's an avid gardener. And I happen to have done a lot of gardening volunteering for botanical gardens. And so I'll periodically go out in the yard with him. I call it the yard, our grounds, and we'll go around, we'll take a look at things. And initially he was very hesitant to be participating. Oh, I have some ideas. Maybe I could buy a few plants. And I said, what would you like to do? I said, this is your home. And little by little, he's gotten very comfortable taking over small beds in our garden space and making it his. And I think that is hugely delightful that he's been able to do that. He's actually the only resident who's really interested in doing that, but he's been able to take a piece of our campus and get personal joy out of it. And how lucky for us that we are able to facilitate something so easy. So some of it is just having eyes wide open, and whatever your role is in the organization, if you see an opportunity that helps give a resident purpose, then move it along. So our administrator is also in a sense co-sponsoring a physical gym workspace right now with one of our residents who's very much into that. And that resident is going to be doing the ribbon cutting because he spoke up and said, I'm really interested in this. And we were able to take it and run. Next, I view my role as to make sure that Life Enrichment is properly resourced, properly budgeted to provide for their services. And what I want to say here is, especially during COVID, I feel like some of our LE teams might feel secondary to nursing or medical disciplines who are asking for PPE and other infection control kind of items. But as we've also seen, the social isolation costs have been pretty steep, both for residents and for the staff during COVID. And so don't be afraid to ask for whatever resources you think you might want or need in order to provide programming. And sometimes the people who are making the budgets aren't thinking about what you're thinking about. So do speak up. Next slide.
Yeah, Tina, before we get into the next slide, I have this question. I have an important question about your community, and I'm sure that some of the call might relate to that. And just so that the audience knows, I myself, Charles, and my daughters have been volunteering in Tina's community. But so here's the question, Tina. When we enter your community is of this, I don't know how to best explain it, but it's of this kind that when you enter the community, it just feels right. And I don't know if you and the audience can understand what I'm saying. Sometimes there are communities where you just walk in and it's, it's fine. And then there are some communities where it's just really vibrant and you feel something just special as you're just entering the room, or the community. And your community, Tina, is of this kind, the fantastic kind. And I was wondering, well, one, did you know about that? And two, how do you create that? Do you think one thing that matters for this to be enabled? What are your thoughts on that?
Wow, I definitely have thoughts on that. And thank you for saying that our community is that way. So on a small level, it's a matter of exactly what you said, creating community. One of the best jobs I ever had in preparation for what I do today was I was a resident assistant in a college dorm when I was in college. And the theme around which we were trained as resident assistants, so again, this isn't rocket science, and I learned this when I was a teenager, was to always look at a building with the eye of creating community. And creating community is different than creating a calendar. It's different than creating a checklist. Creating a community is creating a sense of something. And what is it that people can do to create that sense of belonging, that sense of welcoming? And I would also say very intentionally, I got trained as a yoga instructor, not so much to teach yoga in a studio or on a mat, but to use a lot of the philosophies and the energetic feel and introduce that into my community. And so I work very hard to try to create that welcoming sense. I actually just spoke at the Leading Age National Conference on that same subject of creating, using the yogic philosophies and principles with workforce and how to create community. And so it is something that you can do. You don't have to be a yoga teacher. Something from an administrative start is something as simple as everybody smiles when you come in this community. There's an expectation when you get in the elevator, you say hello. There's an expectation that when residents walk by, you say hello. It sounds like customer service, but when that hello comes from the heart and not just a, I have to do this, then you're creating real community. And leadership and frontline staff and everyone has to buy into that in order for that feel to happen. And it doesn't have to be 100%, honestly, 70%, 75% of a workforce will carry that spirit through. So keep at it, say hello, be welcoming, and learn people's names. Those things all help in terms of creating community. And the other thing is that people all want to be seen, people all want to be heard. no one wants to be invisible. And so being able to have a space where people feel that will help folks blossom.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Everyone wants to be seen. Yeah.
Come by and see us. We're in Washington, D.C. anytime.
Absolutely.
So my last slide, I was saying about how you take some ownership and co-sponsor a couple of events a year. And sometimes you just have to carpe diem and seize the day. So during COVID, an opportunity came up. You know, we've all been on heavy lockdown. And one of the things that we were fortunate to do was eventually get off of lockdown. And I was talking with Charles, who is an avid runner, about the idea as well. And we co-sponsored between Link Senior and Forest Hills the reopening of the DC nursing homes. So we put out a message that we wanted to do a relay fun run between homes. And I invited all the homes in the District of Columbia, the assisted livings and the nursing homes. And in the end, we had 14 communities that said, yes, they wanted to play. And since May was consistent with Older Americans Month, Seize the Day, we invited each community to have their oldest Americans participating. So our community started with a 140-year-old resident who founded the first African-American ballet school in DC. And she took the baton, which said, old people are cool. Thank you, Charles, and handed it to our board director, who then ran it with our EVS director over to our satellite campus, who then handed it to another resident, who then handed it over to staff from that building, who then ran it to the next building. And so this baton was waited for and welcomed and passed between a resident. And in the end, we had 5 centenarians participating. How many people over the age of 100 ever thought they were going to be participating in a relay throughout the whole city? It ran for about 6-7 hours for the day. And we had some coverage on it. We have a short little video to share with you. But the lift, the emotional lift, the energy, which you were just talking about, Charles, the engagement of both the staff and the residents and the celebratory things that came out of that, rather than just opening our front doors, but taking that opportunity and building something more with it, was something that we did. So enjoy this next 2 minutes.
We're here to celebrate the fact that we've made it this far through COVID. Woo! Yeah!
The last year, that was a doozy.
It's good to finally get out of my room. It's nice to have visitors, which we couldn't do for over a year.
I haven't seen a little kid in a stroller. I mean, we haven't heard noise like this in forever.
It had been difficult for everybody, family members and staff, but now we are slowly beginning to reopen it.
I can come to see you. I couldn't come to see you before.
Yeah.
So this is pretty cool, don't you think? Huh? We came during COVID and they're like, you cannot come and see her. I'm delighted that we're finally opening up and we can visit on a regular basis.
We spend a lifetime making friends, and then when you are told you can't visit with them, that takes a lot of getting used to.
4, 3, 2, 1.
This was just a visible way to kind of say, hey, we're alive, we're here, we have survived, and we are resilient, and we're back.
wonderful to not just fling open the doors, but to celebrate that.
So I do want to say a very hearty thank you to Charles and Megan. The three of us basically put this together.
It brings us together, bringing a kind of a relationship, a kind of.
So I do want to say a hearty thank you to Charles and Megan. The three of us basically put this together in a little over a month, I want to say. It was about 5 weeks maybe. And that just goes to show you when you have engaged folks and some creative thinking, you're able to take advantage of the moment and the opportunities. And sometimes in my job, my job has me looking at the lay of the land between all departments. And sometimes I see opportunities to make connections to create something. I could not have strategically planned this in our marketing efforts the year before, right? We didn't know when we were going to get out of lockdown. We didn't know when it would time, but it's being able to look at those types of opportunities when they come around. And we've had a number of communities and residents ask, when is it coming again next round? So we will be doing this again next year. And any of you that want to come by and see us running in May, we'll be happy to do that. It's not a difficult concept, so you guys can do it as well if the opportunity arises. Okay, next slide. So I'm just going to tell you a little short story about some of these photos. We have the Heroes of Hope photo. That was our first vaccination clinic back in January when people were pretty still afraid of it. And I made an on-the-spot decision. Again, what can I do? And I stayed in the vaccination room for 4 hours taking pictures of people getting their shots and being happy about it. This is when people were not allowed to gather anywhere, no break rooms, and everybody was on their own. And so people will come in the building and not even know who was on duty that day because nobody was really mixing. And I took this as an opportunity to build community so people could see faces, they could see their peers with smiles, and some of them were taking selfies and videoing themselves as they were getting their shots, and then their peers who were still afraid were able to see that they were it was okay to get the shot. And in the end, the New York Times came and did a story on our vaccination program. Again, if you go to our website, you can click it on under the news tab, but or maybe Megan can put it in the chat later. But it was an opportunity to build community that we didn't plan for. Again, I just saw the opportunity to build community for our staff who were not feeling connected as much and quite fearful. The next picture, top center, is Charles's lovely daughters. And that was, again, looking at an opportunity during COVID. How do we build community? At that point, children had not been vaccinated, were not really allowed in the buildings, were not allowed to be engaged with residents. And I was looking for intergenerational opportunities. And Charles was so lovely in that his daughters were willing to come by and be our very first since COVID youth volunteers. And what they did was, what we had was the residents went out Easter morning and laid eggs in the garden and hid eggs. And then later on, Charles and a friend brought by a total of half a dozen children who then were the egg hunting crew, and the residents sat socially distanced and were able to watch it. And they came with flowers, and you can see one giving a flower to a resident. And so this was intergenerational program, safe during COVID, without contact. And you just have to get creative sometimes. And this was my contribution when I say, step up and think about 1 or 2 things that you can do during the year. Next picture is the most recent Alzheimer's walk last month on the mall. And that is the first time that we had gathered as a team offsite to do something in support of our residents. And you can see our director of nursing even has purple hair. So, and we were definitely the fun group in the morning at 8 o'clock in the morning dancing on the mall. And Charles and his family came and joined us as well. So when you're talking about engaging, it's not just the people in your building, but it's looking at who in your vendor and business partner community might also want to partner up with you. As you can see, Charles worked with us and Megan worked with us to do the fun run, and that they were engaged with us in the Alzheimer's. So, look at your roster of who your vendor partners are. And during COVID, there are actually plenty of business partners that want to be more engaged and feel purposeful, just like many of our work staff. So use that as an opportunity. Next picture at the bottom row is me doing some gardening because we couldn't have gardeners in during COVID. So a bunch of department heads and myself, we went in and did the annual pruning in our garden. And I think that's kind of what spurred some of our resident interest in gardening. And he's now doing a lot of gardening in our yard as well. And we now have some board members that are doing it as well. So it's just get out there and start it. Just start something small and see if people will follow. Next picture is our snack cart that we took over to the fire department across the street. During COVID, a lot of our fire department folks had been swabbing noses until our Department of Health was doing COVID testing in-house. And we were doing for morale a snack cart and going around and sharing snacks with employees who couldn't get out of their PPE and couldn't get off the floor. So we rolled our little snack cart with the ice cream truck song playing across the street and fed the firemen too, who were helping us. And so it's looking outside the building and how do you engage those folks to be with your residents, and that just helps the relations all the way around. And when our buildings are more fully opened up, we know that those guys are going to be partners and happy to come into our building and talk with our residents about other things. Next picture is Halloween, pretty obvious. Me, I was Alexander Hamilton because immigrants, we get the job done. But I'm actually a native Washingtonian born in DC. Next picture is one of our admins, and she is phenomenal. She's actually the DC Leading Age Action Hero of the Year awardee, and she is on the sidelines, a licensed caterer, loves food, and during COVID, she's been cooking meals for four shut-in seniors every weekend, and she works with a local farmer who has excess farm products that he gives her, and she just Iron Chefs it into different types of foods. And when she has leftovers, she brings them into our employee lounge and leaves them there with a note for employees to take what you need, for cooking and so forth. And she's also our main coordinator. Our director of EVS is actively on military duty right now. And once a month, about half of our department heads put together a week's worth of dinners, and we send them over to his wife's house. Our director has a wife who is a nurse who is single parenting 3 children alone in COVID for the first time in this country. And so we send that over. And again, it's all about building that sense of community. It's not just about activities. And when you build that sense of community, it trickles up, down, and all around throughout the community. And so as a leader, I want to give people space to have that growth opportunity, however it fits them. Next slide. So what you'll see is me on the top left. That was our ugly sweater contest over the winter, and me throwing in my dog Strudel, as in apple strudel, and she's got her ugly sweater on, and we couldn't have pet therapy, and we still haven't had pet therapy come back to the building. So I am the pet therapy, and I periodically bring in my fully papered up dog, and she'll come in and visit the residents, and they just love it. And it's like take your kid to work day. I don't get very much of my desk job done that afternoon when I bring her in, but the residents and the staff really love to see her. So that's my contribution. On the far right, we were doing caroling over the holidays, and my contribution to that little picture, in addition to my my poor vocal cords, was that I just brought in instruments from my now grown kids musical instrument box. And so we had our own Jimmy Fallon kind of musical band, and we would go around and play and sing for the residents. And you'll see on the back picture of that picture, there's a resident coming out of her room, and she heard us with the instruments, and she came out and said, "What's going on?" And so she took some of the instruments and she started playing them. And it was just a really, really fun little moment that really came out of nowhere, right? So we just did that. Next, we periodically have Spirit Week, and as a leader, I got to show up as well. And so here I am with a dining services employee, and we were twins for the day. It's important to play. Play is what keeps us young, and find ways to play. Next picture is an Iron Chef picture. So using my corporate contacts, I was able to talk to a food service vendor who was able to pull in his various dining services directors in the region, and then we hosted an Iron Chef cook-off. And the residents were the judges for this Iron Chef cook-off. And we built it up, and there were posters about it. And it was just a really exciting time. And it gave the people in the dining services teams an opportunity to show off in a way that they don't normally do. Again, just building that positive energy. Next slide. So I hope these pictures show you that what you do is so much more important than what you say. It is important that the director of life enrichment is viewed and supported as an equal part, not a supporting part of the senior leadership team. And when that LE director has voice and is an equally respected part of the team, I think that that's where you're going to see better participation from everyone, right? Help evaluate if the LE activities provide diverse exposure to the 8 dimensions of wellness. So you want to encourage and support the introduction of technology into LE as well. And when we're talking about the 8 dimensions of wellness, you can Google it. It's looking at physical, emotional, social interaction, financial wellness, spiritual wellness, occupational wellness, and excuse me, making sure that the activities program hits on all those different areas, because then you're going to hit the diverse interests of your residents. And even for your residents, you need a holistic perspective. When we're talking about technology, things like iPads, I know we've all gotten better at doing iPads or other tablets during COVID. We use Link Senior here in our community, and there are lots of apps that you can get to for free or very little cost that are going to help people. The one we're experimenting with right now is Headspace, and that's a mindfulness app. And I've been actually using that with our team meetings once in a while to introduce mindfulness and stress reduction with our department heads. And that can flow down so that it's used in different settings with residents. I'll give you one example where I've used my yogic training in team meetings to do breathing exercises. And that has trickled down in that we actually had a resident with a fall last year, and the department head, who went to her immediately and waited until help came, started using some of these breathing exercises. And the resident said, if I had known this the last time I had fallen, I wouldn't have been as panicked. And thanks for sitting with me and doing this. So I think it's really important that we look at introducing those types of things. Next. So the next slide here is about extending your role outside, my role outside of the building to support life enrichment, and what can we do? When we model person-centered care to the life enrichment team, others will do the same. And that's what the example I was talking about, the resident who had the fall. And it's important that we roll up our sleeves as leaders and not be afraid to serve meals during snowstorms, not be afraid to shovel snow if you get snow in the winter, and you have to not be afraid to roll your sleeves up and go participate, and not be afraid of the judgment of, I don't sing so great, or I'm not creative, or any of those other self-limiting barriers and filters that we might put on ourselves. And when you can drop that load and let it go, you can participate more fully. We want to empower. We want to expect other leadership and our team members to contribute to life enrichment the same as they do with other departments. Right now, nursing initiatives and infection control are huge. Infection control is not the nursing's responsibility, it's everybody's responsibility. Disaster preparedness, quality assurance, these are all everybody's responsibilities. And I think the philosophy of person-centered care being everyone's responsibility is important as well. Invite people on your teams to get to know a small handful of residents. If everybody gets to know a small handful of residents and what they're interested in, the exponential value to the organization is huge. I have one department head who likes to do Bible readings with residents. And so she's an admissions person, but she will sit and do a Bible group with folks. She's also become known as the resident DJ on our music system. And so they'll go to her office, even though she has nothing to do with, you know, the daily music choices. Her job is to do marketing and admissions, and she'll put on music for them. So it's just, I like to say, adding those other dimensions. I don't even want to say other duties as assigned. I want to say other duties as suits your passion would be probably more appropriate, and to share your passion with the building. And then also to connect community organizations to the Life Enrichment Department. So I will meet people professionally and connect them. So the most recent one was I saw an intake admission inquiry from a group of a cappella singers from Yale University that are coming to the area in DC soon. And I immediately emailed back and said, hey, I think I know one of your alum. We would love to have you here in our building, and let me introduce you to our director of LE to work out scheduling and what might work. And it's seizing that opportunity because they're a very popular group and they have albums released in Spotify and Apple Music. And I thought I'd better get on their dance card before some other community says we want them. And, you know, sometimes the early bird catches the worm, and people in your organizations should have this orientation to go out there and seize the worm. So if you see an opportunity, make that connection, right? It takes a village for us all to create quality programming around our residents and being person-centered and knowing them. So real quick, just to talk about a few things, I would say another example that I've done in terms of pet therapy, bird visits. So we had some visiting birds during COVID, and our LE staff were really too busy because they've been doing escorts for private visits during COVID. And so I rolled my sleeves up and I took care of the birds for a month, and the residents loved it. So think about doing things that are outside of your normal role to create enrichment.
Can I ask you a quick question, Tina?
Mm-hmm.
So I know, you know, you've also worked with a number of professionals, and I had this simple question, which is that if there is an activity life enrichment professional for you in your shoe, right, which is the leader of the organization, you're the chief executive officer, what is the one trait that you would encourage any activity or life enrichment professional to try to develop for the greater good of your community and what you look into for them? So if there's one thing that they should try to develop, what would that be?
I just want to make sure I heard the question right. So you're saying if there was a life enrichment professional who became a chief executive officer, what would they do? Is that what the question is?
No, the question is, what is the thing that you, how do you say in English, that you value the most in activity and life enrichment professionals?
What is the one thing that I value the most? I would say invite, grab, encourage other departments to participate. And so it's about creating small moments of joy, small moments of opportunity that become practice habits, right? Once we do it and we get comfortable with it, we'll do it more often. And so I think that's the number one thing, because to be honest, every department is busy and they're running around their own agendas during the day. But when Life Enrichment says, we have this going on today, I really could use 5 department heads to stop by and say hello. Be specific about your ask. If you're going to go ask the CEO to do a thank you speech or a hello or a warm welcome, I've often been grabbed, and I'm very, very flexible to doing this. I need you for 2 minutes to open this event today. And I need you to thank this volunteer. I need you to highlight this resident. Be specific about the ask, because I'm happy to go in and do it and be the cheerleader and do that with the team. And it's much easier if the LE director comes to me and says, I need you at this time and I need you to say these 3 things.
Cool.
And I think it works pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, especially in these times where obviously beyond the staffing crisis, the fact that actually most of our when we survey activity and life enrichment professionals, the bulk of them, and that is more than 85%, say that they can't engage everyone, right? And so it would just make natural sense to try to seek help. And I do like your advice about being specific, because even if you, Tina, know pretty well your community, you might not know exactly what's needed. So let's make sure that we ask specific things to other department heads, and actually other departments in general.
Yeah, it helps the department heads to know what the ask is of them, because they may, and even if like you said, the residents in the room, you may not be able to read the room. I may not be able to read that out of the pre-COVID 10, 20 volunteers in a room, that these 3 volunteers were really key to making the event happen. But the LE director would know who I should be thanking publicly.
We have another quick question, and it's not related to that directly, although it is about leadership and culture and so on. What was your stand on the vaccine mandate? And what are your general thoughts on getting, like somebody was asking, like in December 5th, they have this mandate for all visitors to be vaccinated and so on. How did you at Forest Hills manage that?
Okay, so our vaccine program in DC, this conversation has slightly become a moot point, because mandated vaccines in healthcare went into effect September 30th in DC. But the vaccine was approved towards the end of December last year, and we were the second community in DC to become vaccinated on January 4th. And at that point, it was really new, and a lot of people really afraid of it in the beginning. And so we very intentionally, and what I'm going to explain to you right now is a process that you can overlay for lots of challenges in your buildings, whether it's how you want to celebrate National Assisted Living Week and get everybody engaged, or National Skilled Care Week, or you're trying to implement a strategic goal and initiative for the building, something that's a huge, big community-based project. What we did was we broke down sort of key knowledge points for the vaccine. And I'm going to self-report here. At the beginning, I was the very first person to say, let's mandate it, because I believe in vaccines. And I know that I've seen when flu vaccines are mandated, the rate goes extremely down. So I said that, and our department heads came right back at me and said, it's nice you want it, but it's not reality. The workforce isn't going to go with that. So we, after some talking, decided to take our corporate value of compassion and respect. Compassion is having empathy for the suffering of others and wanting to do something about it. That is the definition of compassion. And so we knew that our staff were already suffering with bloody noses from nose swabs, fear of taking COVID home, face acne from masking all day, and lots of other things. And so we said, okay, we're not going to make it a mandatory program. We're going to educate our workforce. Our workforce was 85% African, African-American, 10% Hispanic, and the rest, me and some Caucasians, basically, is what we had. And we knew early on that this was a group that was very vaccine hesitant. So we broke down our communications to not you should, you must get the vaccine, but knowledge is power. We're going to share knowledge with you, and we want you to go home and figure out what is good for you and your family. And we left it at that. And all department heads were part of this. This was not a nursing initiative. It was not an HR initiative. It was all department heads were equally trained. All staff were told, talk to any department head that you run by. So accessibility to information became wider than hunting down their supervisor. And we broke it down into 8 weeks worth of topics. So how many people were tested, and why did it get done so quickly? Who actually invented this? What is messenger RNA? What's in that bottle? What is in that stuff? And how is it impacting my life? How might I already be seeing this in my life already? And lots of other topics. What are side effects? What are side effects versus, expected immune response? What is immune response? And so when we built those topics, we then divided it out by a number of ways to communicate. So one of the strategies is finding 8 ways to communicate. And if you're trying to advertise an LE event, find 8 ways. So we were using texting employees, calling employees, having group huddles, individual conversations, We had giant 70-inch TV screens where employees were checking in for work, and we were running video presentations. We were handing out slips of paper. And so we had just lots of different ways that we were getting the information across so that consumers, our employees, were able to digest it. We know very well that our baby boomers, our millennials, our Gen Zs consume information differently. Some people are text only, some people are email, some people are still on paper. And so we wanted to get it out to everybody. Then we also sliced our communications across different ways of different people's thinking styles. So if somebody was relational, we would say something like, well, do you have a grandma at home or a child who's not vaccinated, somebody pregnant? And if you don't get vaccinated, how might that impact your family relationship dynamics and visits and holidays and so forth? And so we would have those conversations. If somebody was more analytical in their thinking nature, we might have to produce information. There's 135,000 people that were tested here. Out of here, X number had side effects. And of those side effects, X number were considered serious side effects. And so providing the data for those folks. So using the filters of different topics, taking it a topic at a week, different communication styles, and then messaging it out in 8 different ways, we were able to hit people at what was comfortable for them. And we achieved, I think, 85% vaccination by the beginning of March. And we basically were at herd immunity well before the talk ever came to mandated vaccines. So we were able to, we actually landed on the front page of New York Times because our compassionate approach, and this is where it started, was we started with compassion and asked ourselves, what would compassion look like from our employees' perspective? And I think it's a great model for looking at what would compassion look like from your residents' perspective? What would it look like from your team members' perspective? And how do you engage a whole community to create an energetic feel where everyone feels compassion and respect and engagement?
Thanks, Tina. And for me, thank you so much for this fantastic explanation. I think, obviously this plan, the way you described it, was for the vaccine. But I think, like you said, this applies to anything. And actually, the success, one of the most determining factor, one of the most important determining factor of that initiative was just understanding and evaluating engagement, right? And so I just want to thank you for explaining it so well. And obviously, in the purpose of this discussion, this brings us really well back to the engagement piece. Any last closing remarks before the end of the session today, Tina?
I am grateful for the opportunity to be here to share our experience with you. If you have any questions, we would be happy to answer them. Charles will be putting up some information about that. But, there's a yoga saying that the light in me honors the light in you. And there's nothing in me that's any different than all of the rest of you. And you have these brilliant ideas. You just have to have the courage to leave the comfort and safety of what we know behind, to perhaps sometimes go to the unknown territory and experiment. And from a very clinical perspective, when you talk about quality improvement, whether it's in activities, that the Plan, Do, Study Act, plan something, do it, evaluate it, and if it didn't work, change it. Works.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Tina. And
thank you
for the whole thing, and including the last few words here. All of you today, please also consider looking at this fantastic guide, these 10 tips that Tina helped us put together. So these guides we started a couple of months ago, where we partner with our amazing speakers, including today Tina, and we try to craft tips for you to have access to before or after the session. So today, Tina and us, we're happy to provide to you these 10 tips to consider resident engagement and the role of senior leadership. We'll be dropping the link in the chat box for you to have access to it. But please, feel free to be in touch with us. Feel free, absolutely, to be in touch with Tina. Tina, thank you so much for all your work. It's a pleasure to know you professionally. It's a pleasure, obviously, to know you on a friend level, but also thank you for what you've been doing to our community here in DC and more broadly to our whole industry, because it's really leaders in one buildings that affect tens, hundreds, and sometimes thousands of them. So thank you for the work that you do. And actually, thank you for the work of the rest of the team also, especially through COVID. I want to take a moment to also, I want to take a moment to also invite you to upcoming initiatives that we have and upcoming opportunities we have for Activity Strong webinars. So the next one is actually going to be in about a month from now. It's on December 14th, and it's with Eleanor Alvarez, who's going to be talking about staff and resident engagement. We know that the staffing crisis is on her. We've never seen this in this industry. And the idea is, how can we use resident engagement to help our team members find purpose in what they do every day, and really think about this exponential value in this partnership. And actually, before that, chronologically, we have our Activity Strong virtual winter gathering. All of you are invited. It's going to be a half-day event. We have these people having hats. We may have hats ourselves, but it's going to be like a 3-hour with breaks, half-day. And then we also have a happy hour that's going to be led by Dawn and Brian from NCAP. And then we obviously have upcoming events in 2022. So again, Tina, thank you so much for joining us today. All of you, thank you for the work that you do. And I just want to also acknowledge the fact that we're entering this holiday season, which, holidays are always nice, but I know also, having spent enough time with activity and life enrichment professionals, how sometimes stressful it is. So please take care of yourself. Please take care of people in your team and your close ones. And as much as possible, have fun. And as always, thank you for the work that you do. Take care.